Okay, so I want you to imagine standing in a courtroom. You know the drill from 1,000 TV shows, right?
Hmm.
You're waiting for the bailiff to shout, "All rise,"
Yeah.
or for the judge to bang a gavel,
Yeah.
to bring the room to order. That's the image we're all comfortable with.
Sure. It's structured. It's human. There are rules.
Exactly. But picture something else entirely. Imagine the record, the official legal account. Doesn't start when a person speaks. It starts the exact second you realize the door behind you is locked.
It is a terrifying premise to start with, isn't it? We're
Yeah.
so used to the log being a verbal process, a
Yeah.
dialogue.
Right.
But today we're looking at this really unique piece of audio drama writing. It's called The Grand Fled Jury. And we're doing a deep dive specifically into the script for episode 2, For the Record.
And right off the bat, this is not Law and Order. The script makes it so explicit. The record begins, and I'm quoting here, not when the judge speaks, not when the case is read, but when someone realizes they cannot leave.
Wow.
That just hits you.
It immediately reframes the entire concept of justice. In a normal procedural, the process is about discovery, right?
Yeah.
Finding the truth, arguing the facts. Here, the process is a trap. The realization that you're trapped is the opening statement.
Yeah.
It sets this, just this suffocating tone of inevitability.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive is to really peel back the layers of this script. We're not just looking at a horror story. We're looking at this surrealist nightmare about bureaucracy.
Mm-hmm.
We need to dissect this conflict the text sets up between, following procedure and what I can only call supernatural accountability.
That's the core tension. It's the story of a man, Harold, who thinks the rules of the office will save him, pitted against a building that treats abandonment not as just a mistake, but as a capital crime.
It's about what happens when the paperwork you ignored decides to fight back.
Yeah.
So let's set the scene, because the atmosphere described in this source text is it's thick with dread. The script calls for a low hum and fluorescent lights that flicker once, then steady.
We've all been there. It's that specific, sterile, kind of oppressive vibe of an old government building or a DMV late in the afternoon. It's funny how such a mundane setting can be weaponized for horror.
It's almost visceral. The script notes the lights steady. It doesn't say they turn on. It says they steady. It implies this sort of headache-inducing permanence. And then the sound of footsteps stopping. This is where we meet Harold. He tries the door behind him. The script notes the handle rattles, but no click.
And the lack of a click is so important. It's not just that the door is stuck. The mechanism itself has just fundamentally refused to work.
Right.
And Harold is confused, obviously. He thinks it's a malfunction.
Uh-huh.
But this is where we get the first glimpse of the nightmare logic through the character of Marjorie.
Marjorie is so fascinating. She's there with him, but she isn't panicking at all. She seems almost resigned.
Mm-hmm.
She tells him, of course it won't. You don't walk out during opening statements.
That one line does so much heavy lifting. Marjorie is like a guide or, I don't know, maybe a Virgil to Harold's Dante if we want to get literary.
Yeah. Right.
She understands the rules of this place. And when Harold argues, pretty irrationally, there are no opening statements, the narrator just cuts in.
To correct him.
To correct him. Harold is wrong. They've already begun.
Which tells us that the proceedings aren't waiting for human input. The environment itself is the prosecution. The room was judging him before he even opened his mouth.
It removes human agency right from the start. In a normal court, you have a chance to enter a plea. Here, your presence is the plea.
Oh, wow.
The fact that you were in the room means the process is already underway.
And speaking of judgment, we have to talk about the prosecutor, or what they're called here, the jury foreperson. The description of this character's voice gave me chills.
It's described as calm, steady, but the narrator adds this incredible detail. The foreperson doesn't need to raise their voice because their tone carries the gravity of decisions postponed until they began to rot.
Decisions postponed until they began to rot. That is such a heavy line. It takes something abstract, procrastination, administrative delay, putting a file in the later bin.
And turns it into something physical, something organic and decaying.
Yeah.
It reframes inaction as an active force of destruction. We usually think of doing nothing as neutral. Like if I don't send that email, I haven't done anything bad. I just haven't done anything.
Right.
But this text argues that the act of postponing is a form of rot. It festers. It changes the state of the world by neglecting it.
It's weaponized passivity. And look at the evidence the foreperson presents. Usually, Exhibit A is a smoking gun, a bloody glove.
Something dramatic.
Right. Here, the foreperson introduces Exhibit 1, and it's a folder. A complaint marked non-urgent.
And notice the life cycle of that file described in the script. It was filed, ignored, and then buried beneath procedure.
That phrasing is so deliberate. Procedure isn't a system of organization, it's a burial ground.
I think that hits home for anyone who's ever dealt with a large institution. You get that feeling that procedure is just a way to make things disappear.
And Harold's reaction to this evidence is so classic, too. He reads the file and says, this matter does not meet the threshold for action.
It's so robotic, isn't it?
Totally. It's the kind of thing you hear when you're trying to get an insurance claim approved or something. Sorry, doesn't meet the threshold. It's a shield.
Exactly. It's a defense mechanism language. Harold is trying to use the vocabulary of bureaucracy to protect himself from the reality of the harm he caused.
He says, I didn't write this. And he's technically correct. He didn't write the complaint.
But the foreperson catches him on the action he did take. They say, you stamped it.
And the script calls for the sound of that stamp echoing. Just once. It's like a gunshot in this quiet room.
Yeah.
And Marjorie chimes in again here, pointing out Harold's habit. She says he always stamped things, end of day, 5 minutes before close.
That detail paints such a specific picture of Harold. He's not an evil villain twirling a mustache. He's the guy who watches the clock.
The guy who wants to clear his desk so he can go home.
He's relatable, which makes it even scarier. But in this courtroom, that indifference is the crime. The narrator has this haunting line right after Harold insists that's not a crime.
What does he say?
The narrator says, silence answers first.
Wow. Which implies that the silence of the room is the verdict itself. The silence is judging him for all the times he stayed silent. Then they drop Exhibit 2, the meeting that was postponed until it no longer mattered.
I love the audio cue, the script request there. It asks for murmurs, but it specifies they are not voices, memories.
That's a tricky thing to pull off in audio, but conceptually it's brilliant. It implies that the people who were affected by that postponed meeting,
The people who maybe lost their funding or their homes or their justice because a meeting was pushed back.
they're present in the room, not physically, but as echoes of the neglect.
It populates the room with victims without ever showing a body. The injury here is time lost. And for the people waiting on that meeting, that lost time was real suffering.
Which brings us to the absolute core conflict of the episode. The charge against Harold, the foreperson, is very, very specific. They say the charge is not malice, the charge is abandonment.
This is a philosophical heart of the whole deep dive. Malice requires intent. To be malicious, you have to want to hurt someone.
You have to wake up and choose violence.
Right. Harold didn't do that. He just wanted to go home at 5. He probably considers himself a decent person.
But abandonment creates injury through absence.
Precisely. And Harold defends himself by saying, we followed procedure. He clings to that phrase like a life raft. He thinks that if he checked all the boxes, he's safe.
But the foreperson just shuts that down instantly with what might be the best line in the entire text.
Oh, it's a great one.
Harold says, we followed procedure, and the foreperson replies, procedure followed you, right out the door.
It's a devastating reversal. It suggests that procedure wasn't a set of rules to ensure fairness. For Harold, procedure was an escape route.
A way out.
It was a mechanism to exit the situation.
Yeah.
He uses the rules to distance himself from the human problem in that folder.
Procedure followed you out the door. It's like the rules were his accomplices.
Yeah.
And Harold is just struggling to wrap his head around this. He tries to argue logic. He says, this is absurd. You can't put a building on trial. Which, in our reality is true.
You can't sue a brick wall.
Right.
But Marjorie, again, provides the supernatural logic that governs this space. She just replies, you can if the building remembers everything.
That gave me goosebumps when I read it. The idea that the walls have absorbed everything. It reminds me of that old stone tape theory in paranormal research.
Right, yeah.
The idea that intense emotional events can be recorded in the fabric of a place. But here, it's not recording trauma. It's recording apathy.
The narrator expands on this beautifully. The script says, the courtroom breathes, just once, and the walls creak faintly. This personifies the institution.
We always say in political commentary, the system is broken or the institution failed.
And this text takes that literally. The building has become a living entity made up of all the apathy that took place inside it. It's not just a setting, it's the primary witness.
So if the building is the witness and the foreperson is the prosecutor, we have to talk about the jury. The title is The Grand Fled Jury. Why fled? What's going on with them?
We get a clue when the foreperson delivers that line about procedure. The script notes a very specific sound effect. Chair legs scrape all 12 in unison.
That is such a creepy image. 12 empty chairs moving at once.
Very. And the narrator explains the mystery. He says, this is why the jury fled. Not because they feared the verdict.
But why then?
Because the verdict had already been decided without them.
Wow, that's a heavy concept. So if the verdict is already decided, then the trial is just a formality? Or maybe a torture session?
It means Harold never stood a chance. The accumulation of his neglect, the stamped papers, the postponed meetings, had already sealed his fate before he even walked in the door.
In a normal court, you're innocent until proven guilty. The trial is the process of determination.
Exactly. But in this courtroom of memory, the guilt is the foundation of the building. The jury didn't need to stay because the evidence, the rotting decisions, was overwhelming. The outcome was inevitable.
It's almost Kafkaesque. The system is so complete, so total in its judgment that human participation, even the jury, is just redundant.
It's like the bureaucracy evolved to the point where it doesn't need people anymore, even to judge the people it trapped. It creates this sense of absolute hopelessness.
He's up against the weight of his own history, and you can't change history. The ink is dry, the stamp is pressed.
Right.
So let's look at the board here. We have Harold, who is terrified and hiding behind rules that don't work. We have Marjorie, who seems to just accept this reality.
She's cynical. She knows the door won't open.
And we have this inevitability of judgment from the walls themselves. It really feels like the episode is about to end with Harold getting swallowed by the floor or something.
It certainly feels that way. The narrative tension is incredibly high. The narrator notes that the silence stretches and the air thickens. It feels like the final moment of sentencing.
But then we get a shift. Just when you think it's over, the script mentions a new presence. And I love how they describe it solely through sound first.
Yes. The sound design calls for fabric shifting. It's subtle. It's distinct from the dry rustling of papers or the creaking of the walls. It's the sound of a coat or a suit.
It implies a person, but someone different. And an unknown voice cuts through everything with one word: objection.
It's such a classic legal trope, the last-minute objection, but in this context, it feels radical.
Yeah.
Up to this point, the logic has been one-sided. Silence is guilt, delay is crime, the building remembers. No one has challenged the foreperson successfully.
Harold tried, but his arguments were so weak, they were based on the rules of the old world.
And this objection just stops the supernatural momentum cold.
Marjorie recognizes it too. She just says, ah, like she was expecting it, or maybe hoping for it. And Harold asks, who's that?
And the narrator answers, the defense has arrived.
And then we hear a soft thud. A briefcase being placed on the stand. That sound is so grounding to me. After all the supernatural stuff, the breathing room, the flickering lights, a briefcase thud feels very professional, very human.
It anchors us back to a legal framework. It tells us this is still a trial, not just an execution. And the argument this new figure makes is fascinating. The unknown voice says, if the court insists on memory, then I insist on context.
Context. That is a powerful word to throw against memory. Let's break that down. Why is context the kryptonite to this building?
It shifts the entire framework. Think about it. The prosecution, the building itself, operates on absolute memory. It has raw data.
Right.
It remembers you stamped the paper non-urgent. It remembers you left 5 minutes early. It remembers the outcome. The person was abandoned. It's binary. Did you do it? Yes.
But context asks why. Why did Harold stamp it? Was he overworked? Was he understaffed? Was the protocol broken? Was he told by his boss to cut costs?
Exactly. Memory says you did this. Context asks, what were the conditions under which you did this? It introduces mitigation. It introduces humanity into a system that has become purely mechanical.
That's a game changer. Because up until now, we've just been looking at the result, the abandonment. We haven't looked at the cause. And the narrator points out the significance of this moment. He says, and for the first time in years, this courtroom will hear both sides.
For the first time in years. That implies that for a long time, this place has just been a machine for punishment, a meat grinder for bureaucrats. The arrival of the defense introduces the possibility of nuance. It breaks the inevitability that caused the jury to flee in the first place.
It sets up such an incredible conflict for the next part of the story. You have the weight of the rotting decisions versus the potential mitigation of context. It complicates the morality.
Right.
Because, look, we all hate bureaucracy. We all hear being put on hold. We want to blame the Herald on the other end of the line.
We want to see him punished.
But the defense forces us to ask, is Harold the source of the rot, or is he just another symptom? If the system is designed to fail, is the person who stamps the failure fully responsible?
It forces us to ask if context is a valid defense for abandonment.
Or is context just an excuse? That's the real tension. Can you explain away the suffering of others by saying, I was just following orders or I was too busy? The prosecution says no. The defense says maybe.
And the source text ends with a P's for the next installment. Counsel for the Forgotten.
Which is such a cool title. It suggests this lawyer isn't just defending Harold, they're defending everyone who got lost in the system.
Or perhaps they're defending the concept of the forgotten itself, giving a voice to why things fall through the cracks. It suggests a move from a horror story about guilt to a legal drama about, well, maybe not redemption, but at least understanding.
It's a wild ride from start to finish. We went from a locked door and a flickering light to this full-blown philosophical battle over the nature of negligence.
And that's the power of this kind of storytelling. It takes something mundane, paperwork, bureaucracy, the things we consider boring, and reveals the human, almost spiritual cost hidden inside it.
It shows us that boring things can be dangerous things. It really makes you think about your own inbox, doesn't it? What's sitting in there right now that is slowly rotting?
It certainly makes me want to go clear my email immediately after this recording.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Grand Fled jury, episode 2, we're left with the image of that briefcase on the stand. The room is breathing, the jury chairs are empty, and the battle lines are drawn. Memory versus context.
We've moved from the prosecution of rotting decisions to the upcoming battle for explanation. It's a perfect cliffhanger. It leaves you desperate to know if Harold can actually be saved, or if he even should be saved.
I want to leave you with something to think about, inspired by what we discussed. In a world where a building remembers everything you didn't do, every email you ignored, every call you didn't return, can context actually excuse that abandonment? Or is context just another fancy word for delay?
That is the question the next episode will have to answer.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.